Good evening and welcome to Government Center. I'm Nick McCool. On Saturday, Joe Kennedy III officially announced his primary run for U.S. Senate, delivering a primary challenge to Senator Ed Markey. The timing of this challenge is in question, but will the Kennedy name propel him to victory? Joining us to talk about this, former Congressman Michael Capuano, who is a fellow here at BU's Initiative on Cities, and Stephanie Murray from Politico's Massachusetts Playbook. Now, we'd originally wanted to discuss this Joe Kennedy III run for Senate against incumbent Senator Ed Markey, but we're actually going to begin tonight with breaking news that Nancy Pelosi has announced she will begin a formal impeachment inquiry of the president. Congressman, I want to start with you. We've been hearing calls throughout the summer to begin an impeachment inquiry. Over the summer, we also reached half of the Democratic caucus that has essentially said we need to start this. Is this the development in Ukraine that's tipped the scales for Pelosi, or is this kind of a slow trickle for her?
A little bit of both. This is something we've been talking about now for just about a year. I believe first vote on the floor was about a year ago, I think. And little by little, each and every member has started to come around on their own opinion that we deserve to have hearings. I want to make a clear distinction. This is not impeachment. This is hearings to determine whether we should impeach. And there is a distinct difference. The answer might be no. But I think it's been a long time coming. I'm glad it's here. And my hope is that people allow them to do their work. Impeachment is not shouldn't be a political action. It should be a legal, moral, and constitutional action, and nothing less. So my hope and expectation is that that's what will happen.
Stephanie, from your reporting, what are you hearing from the Massachusetts delegation? In the House, we've seen over the summer Representative Catherine Clark, one of the House leadership for the Democrats, has announced she is in favor of this impeachment. Do you think that voices like that are having an impact, as the congressman has articulated here?
Well, when you look at the Massachusetts delegation, they kind of represent the scope that Democrats in Washington, D.C. are feeling on impeachment. Some have been out front on this issue for months, even for years. Congressman Seth Moulton, I think he was the first one of the delegation to really openly call for impeachment. And then on the other spectrum of things, you have Congressman Richard Neal, who I believe is the last person to, I'm not sure if he's supported it yet or if he's still kind of staying quiet about it. Congressman Lynch announced that he was open to an impeachment inquiry yesterday or the day before. So this long spectrum of Democrats, even in our delegation in Deep Blue, Massachusetts, Donald Trump is one of the most unpopular states for Donald Trump in the country. People are still kind of mixed on whether this is the right move, but it seems like opinion has shifted.
Congressman, I want to give the last word on impeachment to you here. I know you've supported it for a while, but a lot of people, maybe even in the Trump camp, in the Trump White House, are saying, look, go ahead, go and impeach him. It might be better for his chances in 2020. What's your response to that?
I think there's a legitimate argument to that on the political area, but everybody has to make their own decision as to when does morality supersede political considerations. For me, that was a long time ago, in the sense that, again, I want to be clear, this is not impeachment. This is simply an inquiry as to whether it should be impeachment. I think that you always want to know the facts before you make a decision. I think not wanting to know the facts is inappropriate. And so in this case, everybody has a different idea. I have shared the concern that maybe it's not the best political move. It depends on what comes out of it. But I think the Constitution in this country needs a legal process and needs to understand that the rule of law applies to everyone. I think that's way more important than any political outcomes.
So it sounds, from what you're saying, that you kind of see this at this point as a fact-finding exercise.
Well, it might lead to impeachment. Now, again, based on what I think I know, which is as much or more than the average person, I actually think there will be impeachable offenses here. But what I read in the media is not how you convict people. If that were the case, O.J. Simpson would have been in jail 35 years ago. You have to go through a legitimate process, and you have to actually base it on facts, not media reports and not someone else's opinion. You have to make your own opinion, and you have to base it on facts. And I think that that's what this process is all about.
So I want to now transition to the Senate race that is shaping up between incumbent Senator Ed Markey and current Congressman in Massachusetts, Joe Kennedy III. And Stephanie, here I want to start with you. Based on what you're hearing from these campaigns, it's basically started as fairly friendly. Obviously, I think Ed Markey is taking this seriously, and certainly with Joe Kennedy's polling numbers, which we'll get to in a moment, he should be. But at the end of the day, they're still kind of playing nice. when are they going to take the gloves off, if at all?
Well, where we're sitting right here, it's the middle of September. We have an entire year until voters head to the polls for the statewide primary next September. And the way somebody put it to me was that Ed Markey has his Senate seat on the line, he has his career on the line, and Joe Kennedy has his reputation on the line deciding to get into this race. So they're both taking it seriously. I think you can expect a lot of money to be spent, a lot of divisions to be created in the party, but we've got a long way to go until voting day next September.
Absolutely. Congressman, this one to you. Tell me where these two people, Joe Kennedy, Ed Markey, kind of differ ideologically, because in a sense they're both running on fairly liberal platforms.
I'm going to leave that to them to draw their own distinctions. Again, Stephanie just mentioned, we have a year. They have plenty of time to draw distinctions on different issues. I haven't studied either one of their voting records. I'm familiar with it in general, but I haven't done the comparison because I don't have to.
Right.
So I will leave that to the candidates to flesh out how they want to present themselves to the public, and they will. By the end of this, most of us will probably be sick and tired and seeing their ads. That's to be expected.
Sure. Before I get into the polling numbers, do you want to weigh in on that and just see where you're hearing they're going to start to try to draw some distinctions?
So what I've heard so far, Congressman Kennedy took a pledge not to accept any corporate PAC money a few weeks ago before he jumped in. That's something that Shannon Liss-Riordan, who's another Senate challenger, has been kind of pushing Ed Markey on. And then obviously Senator Markey is one of the co-sponsors of the Green New Deal, and that's really his signature issue.
They both are. They both co-sponsor that. And I think that there will be differences. I don't know what they are because I haven't studied it. But the ones that are most out there, to my knowledge, they are similar. But most elections are not necessarily about what has happened. It's where you want to bring the country and where the country wants to go. Most elections are about the future, which is they may or may not have different visions or different visions on how to get to the same place in a different path. I don't know. That's what elections are all about.
Congressman, I want to, show you some of the polling here that we've seen in recent days. This is from September 3rd through the 5th. Suffolk University and Boston Globe poll found 42% go with Joe Kennedy versus 28% with Markey for likely Democratic voters. And in addition to that, a 59% favorable rating of Ed Markey versus a 73% favorable rating for Joe Kennedy. For an incumbent, Ed Markey's kind of got to be shaking his head here. What's he got to do?
First of all, those numbers are interesting, but it's the old thing. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting somebody who has had some personal relationship with the Kennedys or the Kennedy name, or think they do. Ed's been around a long time, and the Kennedy name is something. If Joe decides to run just on the Kennedy family name, or if that's the way it's presented, he'll lose. I don't think it helps. It is well respected. But that's an initial beginning. When you knock on a door and somebody knows you, that's a beginning. It doesn't mean they're going to vote for you. It means they'll be polite to you and they'll listen to you maybe more. So therefore, I think Joe will have the opportunity to be heard more than an average challenger. But in the final analysis, people will vote in their own personal interest. And the name, again, the name is well known, well respected. But Eddie is too.
Stephanie, I'm curious that Joe Kennedy is making this argument that he is this kind of young progressive voice. Frankly, it's a similar voice that we saw last year with Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. As a white man running against a white man, can he make that argument?
I think it's difficult to compare this race to any of the races of the 2018 midterm because of Joe Kennedy's his race, his gender, his age, all of those things. We're going to have to wait and see. I guess it's just a totally different dynamic in the way that you're seeing the establishment kind of line up behind Ed Markey. Some are also lining up behind Joe Kennedy because he has relationships with so many people. And you kind of would expect the young activist-y type Democrats to line up behind kind of a new face, a younger generation. But a lot of them are sticking with Senator Markey because of his advocacy on the Green New Deal and on climate. And Congressman, I'd be interested to see if you had given Ed Markey any advice or anything
As
about.
asked. If he asks, I'll give it to him. I do think it's a different race, and I think every race is a different race. It's a different dynamic. And again, we have two people that are relatively well known, two people that have come from basically the same general place ideologically. I'm sure there'll be differences, but it's the same general place. And when everything's said and done, I actually think it's going to be an incredible race to watch. And I think no matter what happens, Massachusetts will be well served. The question is, what is it? What's your vision? What's the vision of the individual voters? Where do we want to go? Who do we want to be behind? I don't think it's going to be one of these races. I don't think anybody's going to get negative here. I mean, there might be, surrogates that get negative, but then each candidate, if they have one that does that, will then say, no, that's not what I say. There's no negative here. They both have positive things to present. I don't think you're going to see any negativity in the campaign to speak of, but I do think it's going to be about where does America want to go in 20 years, and whether everybody who has the energy, who has his finger on the pulse, and that's it. Again, I think this is just getting started. For me, having not been a student of their records, because I never had to be, I don't know where the distinctions are going to come. I do think you'll see them, but I agree. I don't think this race is comparable to some of the races we've seen thus far.
Mm-hmm. And then last question to you, Congressman. I'm curious if you think that, a race like this is healthy for the Democratic Party, given that they are trying to unite against a president who is, certainly deeply unpopular within the electorate and definitely with the Democrats. Is this what they really should be focusing on right now?
I've never worried about that stuff. There was some people said that about my race 2 years ago, and my answer is, I don't worry about those things. I mean, it is. You can. Who is anybody to say you shouldn't run, or you should run, or you should be elected? It doesn't work that way. People run when they're ready to run. People run because they want to serve. You have people that have. Most everybody that I know that ever put their name on the ballot for school committee to president does it for all the right reasons, and they think they have something to offer, and they think they have a good vision for the community. It's the same thing here. You can't judge that. I've heard that argument. I don't think the candidates have made it to themselves. I hope they haven't. I just kind of discount it because, first of all, it doesn't play well, and it's almost inside baseball. It's something that I just don't buy into.
And in his speech, when he was announcing his campaign over the weekend, Congressman Kennedy basically said the opposite, that the only way to engage more voters and get more people to turn out and to be engaged with Democratic politics is to run campaigns all over the place and really get people interested.
Right. Somewhat of a rising tide effect, perhaps.
But
that's the pitch.
Some of the things you've heard and you will hear are going to be the typical things you hear from every incumbent and every challenger to an incumbent. I mean, every challenger to any incumbent says something along those lines. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just they both have legitimate arguments to a certain extent, and none of those arguments are going to matter in the end.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, Congressman Capuano, Stephanie, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us on this inaugural edition of Government Center. We appreciate your analysis.